Hi, everyone. I'm Alyssa Gershwitz, editor-in-chief of the Hornbook, and I'm so thrilled to be welcoming you to our third virtual cover-to-cover event, graciously hosted by the Eric Carle Museum of Picture Book Art during the Hornbook magazine's 100th anniversary year. The Hornbook was founded in Boston in 1924 by Bertha Mahoney Miller in order to blow the horn for fine books for young people, and we have been devoted to that mission ever since. We'll be celebrating all year long, and you can find more information on our website, hbook.com. Our May-June issue of the magazine is typically known as our themed special issue, and this year's was a very special issue in a year full of them. Our focus was nonfiction and hornbook and children's literature history, and we had over 40 contributors, including a wonderful article by Boston Public Children's Librarian Dr. Suhei Lugo, called "With a Salute to All Children's Librarians, Amplifying the Work of Black, Indigenous, and People of Color in Children's Librarianship." In it, she highlights 5 important librarians: Charlamagne Hill Rollins, Cora Belpre, Effie Lee Morris, Lotsie Patterson, and Augusta Baker, who was also a Hornbook contributor. Earlier in the year, we had starred a picture book biography about Baker, Go Forth and Tell, The Life of Augusta Baker, Librarian and Master Storyteller, published by Dial Books. So when we were looking for a cover for our very special May-June issue, we knew this would be a perfect fit. And it even has a special gatefold. The author of Go Forth and Tell is Dr. Breanna J. McDaniel. Breanna is also the author of Hands Up, Impossible Moon, and the upcoming Cute Toot. She grew up in Atlanta and went to Emory University and Simmons University, and was also a Hornbook Guide reviewer. She holds a PhD in education, thank you very much, and is the co-founder of Researchers Exploring Inclusive Youth Literature. Welcome, Breanna.
Thank you so much.
April Harrison is a fine artist and illustrator whose picture books include, among others, H is for Harlem, which recently won a Boston Globe Hornbook Honor Award, Me and the Boss, which was a Coretta Scott King Illustrator Honor Book, and her first illustrated book won her the 2020 Coretta Scott King John Steptoe Illustrator Award for New Talent. It was What is Given from the Heart, which was the last picture book by acclaimed author Patricia McKissick. Thank you very much. Welcome to you both. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
So I have many questions to ask. I'm hoping to get a great conversation going between the two of you, but I'm going to get us started with some information about the subject of your picture book. So Breanna, for people who haven't yet read the book, what can you tell us about Augusta Baker?
So I think my favorite thing to talk about when it comes to Augusta Baker is the fact that her reach was so far and wide. She was your librarian's librarian, and she was your author's librarian. I have a really good friend. Her name is Stacy Collins, and she's an amazing friend, but she's also an incredible librarian. And it's so funny because I was working on a presentation that was connected to the Augusta Baker book, and I needed some help with some of the research, and asked Stacy if she knew about this particular citation from Virginia Hamilton for an article that Virginia Hamilton had written for the Horn book. And Stacy said, no, but I think I know where I can get access to many different copies of the Horn book from the 80s, which is when I need this from. She found the she found the article, and she copied it, and then she sent it over to me as a PDF. And I think when you have incredible people like that in your life who are librarians, I like to think of myself as kind of parallel in experience, because Augusta Baker was the inspiration for so many other authors and illustrators across the US and across the world since she traveled globally and activated globally. And here I am, many, many years later, having a similar experience with my own Augusta Baker in some sense with Stacy. So she was a librarian, and she was an author and illustrator's librarian too. Very well respected and admired, and I love that.
And Stacy, you are being compared to Augusta Baker here, so I hope you. I know her too, and she is fantastic. That's a great story, a great way of working together and bringing people's work forward. It's just really amazing. Did you know about her when you were a kid? Was it when you were in grad school? When did you first learn about her and her work?
So before, when I was in grad school at Simmons, I was introduced to Augusta Baker via my mentor, Dr. Michelle Martin, who was the inaugural Baker's Chair at the University of South Carolina. And so I actually got to attend an Augusta Baker's Dozen festival and seeing all these kids, seeing all the storytellers, seeing all of this movement with literacy. That was really my first connection to that space. But I didn't know that eventually I would be able to write about her, which is kind of just like this theme because I met April at an ALA lunch, and Dr. Dean Simmons Bishop was there, and Dr. Martin was there, and I have this picture with me and April, and I couldn't have known that years later we would also be doing this project together, and that she would become. I had already admired her, but being able to have a relationship with her, being able to have sisterhood with her, I couldn't have imagined that. So that kind of seems to be a thread when it comes to Augusta Baker and me. Is somehow it always comes back around to Augusta Baker.
Wow. And April, you're even in South Carolina, but did you know about her before? How did you first learn about her? How did you get involved?
Actually, I was invited to an event in Columbia, and it was part of the Augusta Baker's event. And I think Dr. Professor Donna Johnson invited me there because she wanted me to see what goes on with the Augusta Baker festivities. And she wanted me to meet some of the key librarians there. And so it was a very interesting trip. It was a very interesting trip. The first time I heard of Augusta Baker's name, then believe the second was through Breanna, her work. And it was very interesting to learn about Augusta Baker because I didn't know anything about her. Breanna's words just brought her to life and it made me curious. So I did my own research as well. And, I came away, admiring such a wonderful woman, a librarian. So, and she was an advocate for what I believe in children's books and illustrations of African-American children in children's books. So, I was just thankful to do the project. I was really thankful that Breanna wanted me on the project. And and so it was an astounding yes, because I admire not only the author, but the subject as well.
Mm-hmm. Did you all get paired sort of the usual way that an author illustrator gets paired? The publisher takes care of it and you didn't have any communication, or how'd this go?
Yes, that is how it happened.
Yeah.
But so essentially I was told that April was going to be the illustrator for the book. And I was like, what? I'm real? April Harrison? April Harrison, the fine artist? April Harrison, the award-winning children's book illustrator? What? And I called all my friends and I was like, April Harrison. And if you don't know, one of the first times I was exposed to April's work out in the wild was not actually through a picture book. It was one of her one of her portraits, or not a portrait. One of her pictures was in an episode of the NBC show This Is Us. So I'm sitting watching the show, and I'm watching the show. And I go, oh, that's April Harrison. And I was like, oh my gosh. So that was the excitement. It was like, I actually have this incredibly famous person who said yes to this manuscript. Um, and even though it was the initial connection was made kind of in the traditional way, April also was the one who reached out to me to further the research that she had already done and to connect around research. And then we were doing research together, which is one of the first times I got to do that with an illustrator. And it was so fulfilling because I felt that there was true kinship and partnership in the process of creation. Um, because we were discovering and finding out things at the same time. So, sorry, April. You know how excited I get.
No, me too. You go ahead, girl. You know, it was usually it's like that. You know, the illustrator doesn't meet the author. They keep it separate because the author will have her set of ideas, and so will an illustrator. And a lot of times, you know, they could kind of influence the illustrator a little bit, maybe too much sometimes. And I think it's good for me, the author, because I want to know who they are, you know, and what they expect from their book. You know, not that I'll do it, you know, to the T, but I want to know. I won't, but I want to know when they wrote this, how did they see it? You know, visually. And, you know, I try to listen to them, I take notes, and a lot of times I surprise them, you know, but I stay true to my vision as well. And hopefully we both line up and we appreciate the efforts, you know, the writings and the text and the actual illustration and the images. They'll marry well.
Breanna, were there surprises in the book for you? Or
It was the only thing I was really surprised by was how personal it was. Because April's research was so extensive, you will see that there are parts of the images in the book where she has actually taken some of the titles of some of the stories that Augusta Baker wrote and had access to, and she put those onto the covers, or excuse me, into the bindings of the books, which is, I thought it was so, and then, yes, exactly.
These. I actually took some of the books she approved of. Instead of just putting any title there, I actually put the title she actually approved of. So most of the times when you see the bindings, read the bindings and you'll get a great book out of it. You know, you can check out from your library.
And then there is one spread. I cannot read this book out loud without crying at this spread because it is my most favorite thing that I've ever seen. I also love anything that's in space, connected to space, and it's the image of Augusta's words painting the world. And when I saw that, honestly, I started crying the moment I opened the book. Let me stop lying, acting like I just started crying with that first.
That's it.
Yep. And that became, when I saw that was the image that was going to be on the Hornbook cover, I was like, yep. Because I felt affirmed in how much that resonated with me, that it was chosen to resonate with so many other people as well. Everything April touches is stunning. So I'm just grateful.
Thank you, wow.
Well,
you
April,
that,
no, you go.
No, this actually was almost not a reality, you know. I don't know if I ever showed Breanna my first sketch of it. I had Augusta standing as if she was conducting an orchestra, and she had the worlds lined up here, and she was painting them this way. Yeah, right. We went with something else, and they loved that. The editors, they loved it, but there was a but. They wanted Augusta's image to be larger, so I had to rethink this page, and that's how this became but I love the other one. And I love this one too, but I love the
Mhm.
other one as well. I'll show it to you sometime.
Please, I just want to see it. I promise I won't take it out of your studio.
Birthday present.
Christmas.
Outtakes, the outtakes.
Okay.
April, I wanted to know how you got into illustration because you are a fine artist, and then your
I
first
am.
picture book was, I mean, it was the start of something really huge. So what brought you into this world?
I was approached by Random Penguin House.
Mhm.
They were looking for different artists on their different websites. They came across a website. I was with a Visca Fine Art Gallery. They were looking for a particular artist in that gallery. They stumbled across me and they said, we kind of like that. So they contacted me via email and said, hey, would you like to illustrate a book, a children's book? And I'm like, who, me? I'm just kidding. I've always wanted to. I mean, starting way back in the day, but I kept getting rejected. I would send in illustrations. I would send in everything to publishing houses, even to what's that? The card company called?
Oh, Hallmark. Yeah.
There you go. Just rejection after rejection. I just saved all the letters, put them in a little pile, and I went on and furthered my art career as far as my fine art was concerned. Until Random House reached out and talked to me and asked me that I want to do a children's book. And they said, we're looking for a certain field. They already had an illustrator, but they said, we're looking for a certain field. So they asked me to do one image, one illustration, complete illustration of a page in action, one of the pages in action. And I did that. They loved it. And I became the illustrator for Patricia McKissick's book. Now, they didn't tell me that she was the actual author. I would have flipped out.
Oh my
I
God.
would have been too nervous, I think. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I would just been too nervous. So they didn't tell me who she was or he. They didn't tell me until after I got the position. And I think people probably read this in my bios and about how I used to read all her books to my children when they were babies. I mean, I would just go get a Patricia book, go get a Patricia book, go get a Patricia book. And then to know that I would be illustrating for one of her books was beyond. And then some, but she died before she had the opportunity to see the book.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
or even one illustration, she didn't get to see it. And I didn't get to meet her.
Oh.
So if I had any regrets, that was probably one of them.
Well, and speaking of regrets, I hope you kept all those rejection letters from the.
I burned them. I burnt them all.
You burned them? You burned them?
Little match. No, I still have some.
New beginnings, all in the past.
New
Wow.
beginnings.
That's
And I always tell people, delay is not denial. That's not God's denial. It's just like I had a delay. That's all it was. And I went into another direction. One window, 50 windows closed and another door opened, and I walked through that fine art door and I stayed there. And then he brought them to me. So everybody came to me like, do you want to do this? Hey, do you want to do that?
Yeah.
And I live in this little town, was growing, Greenville, South Carolina. And my friends always told me, hey, you need to move to New York, girl, go to Atlanta, move to New York, get out of that little town. Don't want to find you there. But
that's
God.
good. If nobody finds you now, that you can just have your peaceful time, do your work, and they come to you.
Found you
What's
now.
better? Wow.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
And Breanna, did you have such a good story too? Or how'd you get into the field?
So I actually started out in the MFA program at Simmons. And I went to Simmons and I loved writing and still love writing, but I really loved the critical engagement that I was learning about at Simmons. So I decided to pursue an MA instead of an MFA, and then went on to get my PhD. But I think that writing is a craft that once you get started, it's just not going to leave you alone. And my writing never left me. And so my first book, Hands Up, which is also the only book right now that's been banned, which was a journey.
Interesting.
in acceptance. I had written that and went through all of these different, I actually submitted that for, I won't tell you what prize or contest it was. I submitted that for a contest and they were like, nah, good luck, but no. So eventually, though, my friend who was at Simmons with me, Dana Chidiak, became my editor at Penguin. And she liked Hands Up. But she didn't contact me about it until like 2 years after I sent her the initial manuscript. And from there, we were able to pull together a really beautiful manuscript that I'm very proud of. But it was really meant to be wasn't meant to be an evergreen text because it is an allusion to Hands Up, Don't Shoot.
Mm-hmm.
It was really meant to be a time capsule text because I had hoped that the world would change. Just generally hope the world would have changed. But it's evergreen still for now. But that's how I got started.
And so when you are working on a book about a real person, versus working on a book from your mind, from your imagination, I have many questions that come from that. But one is it especially challenging, or is it I guess helpful to the creative process when there's somebody to have as sort of the starting point, the focal points, versus just coming up with a story that you imagine from beginning to end?
So I like to believe that I do well under pressure, but I would never imagine or would ever pretend that pressure is not a big thing to me. Like even now, my hands are starting to sweat, my mouth is starting to water, because I think when I'm writing from my own imagination, I'm just building projections of what I want. But when you're writing about someone real, you need to get it right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started writing the book about Augusta Baker during the height of the pandemic in 2020. So I couldn't go anywhere to actually do this work. So I'm contacting people from all over the place, trying to build out a body of research, and then trying to find a way to connect all the things that I was learning about her so that it made sense. So my initial manuscript was very, very, very long, actually, compared to what we got now. And then we just had to cut a lot out. And we ended up with enough to be able to create the timeline at the back of the book, which was incredible. But I feel like you have to honor the person that you're writing about by being as accurate and give as much context as possible about who they are and also about why you're writing and the connections that you might have to this. That's why I was so grateful to April for making it so personal, and also very grateful to Dial for allowing me to write a really personal author's note and to include a picture of me with my childhood librarian who has inspired me in so many different ways. So, yeah, for me, it's harder to write a biography because we just want to honor that person and be as intentional and accurate as possible.
Well, and such a big life too. And so, April, is that how you approach? How do you decide which moments, which parts, which which pieces of the story to illustrate in different ways? Because we have lots of variety in the book too. There's everything is very recognizable as your gorgeous style, but we have different color palettes, we have different figures, different moments in time. How do you make those sorts of choices?
Basically, it's always based on the author's words. I try to embellish them a little bit. Imagine like a child would read a book, what would they want to see? You know, because I'm still a big children's book fanatic myself. You know, I'd love to go into the bookstore and look through them without a child at my side. And it's exciting to me when I read the words and then I look at the illustrations and how they just uh, glorify them. You know, it just makes them bigger and brighter. You know, and it really speaks to the imagination of a child. And I try to go to my childlike area, you know, because I am doing children's book illustrations, and I don't know. Sometimes I'm thinking I need to start looking at some more cartoons. I need to start looking at some more kids movies because you know this world is so, you know, and you kind of miss and lose that childlike quality. You know what I mean? And the child is just awe. They're just awe. And so when I paint, that's what I'm creating. That's what I'm trying to create, the awe in it, y'all. And actually, that's why I initial my name is an awe, A-H, that's what, apostrophe H, because I want to create that for a child or people that review my work, that sense of awe. With children, in this particular book, it was important for me to, as she's writing about the telling of her grandmother telling her stories, I wanted to show those stories. You know, I just wanted to throw them at you and imagine what they could have been like for little Augusta when she was listening to her grandmother tell those tales. And that was exciting for me. You know, I think I might have went overboard at some points. You know how you say, pull it back. They had to reel me back a few times. The editors, they just reel you on back. But I have some of my sketches and it was just too much. And so they kind of reeled me back.
I love it.
Oh, no.
Ooh, boy, I can go there. Okay.
Oh.
Well, I was gonna say when you were describing, you know, the cartoons and looking at from, you know, a children's, really getting the children's perspective, you really don't compromise though. You're not, you know, these are such child-friendly illustrations, but they're fine art. You know, this book it's a piece of art, and the way that you all collaborate on it, and to hear you talk about your experiences, it really helps bring together not just this book but the profession and the life of a really important person that that if people don't know about, they really should.
Well, I come from a perspective of course, a fine artist. And unlike an illustrator, I admire them greatly. You know, I like the ones that go through the Adobe, they go through the computer, they do all the thing. With me, it's all hands-on. It's just hands-on. It's just like if I was creating an art piece. So anytime you see my piece in an actual book, I'm creating my fine art. You know, it gets difficult at some points, you know, when I'm trying to do a actual story, nonfiction story like Augusta's, you know, just like Breanna says, you have to really pay attention to details, you know, a period of time, what was going on in the world, what type clothing, what was going on, you know, how did they live at the time, the structure, the buildings, the cars, you know, you have to really do your research. And that is important to get it right, but I'm all into the fiction. I love fiction because I can go all the way with fiction and come all the way back down, you know, and I don't have any gateway keepers. I don't have anybody telling me, oh no, she can't be blue, she can't be green. You know, I can do my own thing as an artist. You know, as artists, fine artists especially, we want to do our own thing. But you know, so fiction allows for us to do that. And I love fiction, but I also like the nonfiction. I never thought I'd do a nonfiction book because they used to approach me with those. And I would say, absolutely not. But then like people like Breanna comes along and they have this fantastic story. And I had to honor Augusta. You know, it's like, what? Shoot. So that brought me out. Shirley Chisholm brought me out. You know, powerful women. And I had to help tell that story, recreate the story.
Well, and I wanted to ask, maybe this is a question more for Breanna, but maybe for both of you. Um, especially when talking about somebody like Augusta Baker, who worked in a profession that was overwhelmingly white, is still overwhelmingly white. That's part of her story, a huge part of her story. But there's a sense of sort of buoyancy and optimism and, success and what she did that really focuses her story in a profession and a world that, like Breanna said, we're still right back there. So was that, was that always the approach? Did you have to think that through? Did you have to decide how to approach a story in a world that still really needs it and it's very immediate? Or was that always just how you wanted to?
No, I think it was very cool. I'll always think it's really cool to be sitting in this space, in this future space, and reflect on, our historical and our ancestral movements that we're still a part of in some ways. And so what was important for me was drawing the parallels between now and then. And I hadn't thought of hopefulness as being kind of theme throughout it, but I think that optimism that maybe is in the book is just because I'm trying to be optimistic now in a space where that's very difficult. And hope is something that's very hard to hold on to sometimes. And sometimes I sit in despair, and I can imagine maybe sometimes that Miss Baker had those moments where she's fighting and maybe it's not moving, or she's not moving in the direction where she sees any kind of progress. But you stay hopeful that exists, even if you kind of acknowledge that it's really, really hard. And so that's what I'm doing even right now. But I hadn't thought about the possibility of there being that kind of theme actually existing in the space. So I'm glad you read that into it. I don't know that it wasn't intentionally infused into it, but also, being able to look back with these kinds of texts and these kinds of opportunities, being able to look back and see that there has been progress,
right,
even if Ms. Baker isn't still here on this plane to experience it with me. I'm obviously sitting in her legacy
exactly,
right now. So it's hard to also not connect that with this present time. I can be hopeful because I am the product of progress and change that was initiated and fulfilled through people like Augusta Baker.
That makes me think too of what April was saying about that balance between child focused, important child, like but not, but being honest and being truthful and making sure that all of that is encompassed in a picture book. It's tough, and you all did such a magnificent job with it.
the thing, like Breanna was saying, the thing, and with me as an artist, growing up, I didn't see a lot of positive images of me anywhere, of African-American children, which bothered me. And just like it bothered Augusta, she saw them, but they were negative images, and she went about creating change. And what I love about this book is we are that change. I mean, look at our images now. Look at our stories. I mean, she would just be beaming, to know that what she began is continuing. I won't say it's finished. I don't think anything's finished till we all leave here, but we're still a product of that. And we're we're agents of change. We're still changing things. We care enough to change, because my thoughts are, it's always about the children, protecting the children. And my thing is, I always want a child, and I know I've said this, I don't know how many times, but I always want them to be able, when they're in a room full of all kids of all diversities, I want them to hold their head up when they see their books come out and the teacher decides to read certain stories. I want them to be proud. I want them to hold their head up. I don't want them to be ashamed of the images that are depicted in the book. So as my duty and my sworn duty is, I'm going to make sure on my part that they are proud. They're proud to turn each page. They're proud to hear the stories like Breanna writes, and other authors such as Breanna. And so I just admire Augusta because I know I would have loved her, and I'm sure without a doubt that she would have said, April, join my team of illustrators and help us change the way illustrations are done for African American children. And I would have been a yes, ma'am, here I am.
Wow. Well, I have many more things we could talk about, many more questions. If you all wanted to bring anything else up, I also wanted to ask what you're working on now, if you're allowed to share what you're working on now, where we should follow you for updates, what we can learn, if you have final thoughts.
Go on, cute too.
Well, I am actually on the road right now, and I'll be heading back to, I just came from the UK. I'll be heading back to the UK later this week to be at the Edinburgh Book Festival, celebrating my book, Cute Toot, which is about two sisters who have a farting contest. And it is glorious, and it came out in April. And I love that book. I think it's so good. And like all of my other books, except for Go Forth and Tell, Cute Toot did come out of a place of grief. And I, can talk about that maybe in another conversation. But I think grief can be a very productive emotion. And so if I were to leave with a last thing or a last thought, I would say I would encourage people not to be afraid of grief, and to give yourself time and space in grief when you need it. Yeah. April, we're gonna talk about fairies.
Oh.
Okay. The only other project I'm working on at the moment is a book. It's called Violet and the Frost King. And it was written by the late, great Virginia Hamilton and her son. And it's scheduled to come out in 2025. So it is a book about fairies and the Frost King. And I cannot remember the original. Do you know the original author of that particular book? Because they did an adaptation of it, but yeah, but it's going to be about, this one is going to be about different types of little fairies. And the story is wonderful. And I'm having a lot of fun with it because the sky's the limit. I can do what I want to do. I'm just kidding. I'm sure they're going to edit some of that, but I'm having so much fun with it. And it will be published by Little Brown. And so I'm looking forward to that coming out in I think it's January 2025, if I'm not mistaken. I might be wrong.
Our eyes open.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much. It's been great. And it's really just the beginning of a conversation. We could have another hour talk.
Oh, it's been fun.
So
beautiful.
I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you, Alyssa. Thank you. And
thank you, Alyssa.